Greetings, HU 140 Cultural Diversity class. My name is Alyssa. I am your professor for this term in this class, and I'm very happy to be here with you. I held our Zoom meeting today, but it didn't look like anybody could come, so I'm going to go back and review to see what times work for you, and hopefully we'll be able to connect. That being said, I still want to welcome you, give an overview of a few points about our class, some tips, and then I want to talk about the framework for how we're going to approach our information. I want you to think about the way in which you think about the world. And that's complicated. It might sound a little bit convoluted rather, but in fact, it's about establishing critical thinking skills. So let me share with you a presentation here, and there we go, my welcome slide. One thing I want to do is talk about the course description. It's important that you're taking time at the beginning of the term to review the syllabus and the course descriptions and understand what's expected of you. We have in the syllabus a breakdown of the assignments and the content based upon the weekly modules. And as you can see in week 1 here, you have a discussion that's expected, the knowledge check, and then also an assessment here, the journey begins with you. And so each week you have a discussion. You are required to post at least twice to that discussion. Your initial response should be a reply to the discussion prompt. And in that, you should post that response by Wednesday. You should be referencing course content when you are responding in your discussion post. And your second post needs to be a response to either something I have said or one of your fellow classmates, and that needs to be done by Sunday. So Wednesday for the initial response and Sunday for the second response. Understand too that this is a discussion that we're having, and so I expect that you are participating in a discussion, which is, conversation that goes back and forth, which means I want to see you participating at least 2 different occasions, on 2 different occasions during the week. And so perhaps you post on Monday your initial response, and you come back in on Thursday and you respond to somebody else. If you're coming in on one day at one time and you're doing both, you have met part of the requirements under the rubric definitions for full credit, but you have not met them all because you're not engaging the actual conversation. So keep that in mind for discussions. The modules that we have for each week, I think, are pretty interactive and a great kind of presentation of content. It affords you a comprehensive understanding of the main concepts for the week without expecting you to buy a book. And so because it's online, we're able to pull articles and videos. And so I think it's a really kind of complex and yet nuanced and intricate presentation of ideas. So make sure that you're going through your module information and the content in the content within the module so that you can reference it in your assessment and in your discussion posts. Remember that you need to reference your resources in APA formatting and follow the directions so that you can receive full credit. Sometimes students will say, well, I'm not quite sure what I can reference in the module. And you could go to the TED Talk here and reference it directly, right? And so there is content that is available for you throughout that can be referenced. And I do suggest that you also look at the rubrics, and I'll take a minute to show you where these things are in our classroom in case you haven't found them yet. So let me actually stop sharing this page and pull that up for you. Let's see here. Okay. Okay, so now you can see the term here. This is Summer B, and this is actually section 8K. But it goes, without saying that it's the same thing for whatever class you're in. I'm going to put on the student view here for a moment So you see, or I see what you see. And, you know, when we go to our discussions here, week 1 discussions, you want to introduce yourself, but you also want to make sure that you're answering the prompts. And if you click up here at the top with the 3 dots that are in a line, it says show the rubric. And so here you can see what's expected of you for meeting full or meeting the requirements for full credit. Collaborates with fellow learners. This is the part where you can only earn full credit if you are actually collaborating. And that means coming back in and responding over the course of at least 2 different times. Your posts address all required elements of the discussion there. Posts are well written, well organized, demonstrating excellent and scholarly writing. So what that means is, you know, are you providing clear academic language there? And then are you also referencing your resources in APA? So if you don't have anything that you're referencing, you are missing, you know, already here. And then also probably missing out when it comes to the techniques here, mechanics rather, and then also addressing all the required elements, because you can't fully answer all the elements if you're not assessing content. So that being said, I'm going to stop sharing that screen for a moment and then share with you once again the presentation. So now you can see the rubrics here. So that's where you find your rubrics for all the assignments. And late policies, it's really much easier for me to work with you on extending deadlines if you reach out to me prior to the due date. The campus-wide or the college-wide, university-wide policies require that students ask for approval to submit late work prior to the due date. And so I can help you out a lot more if you do that. If you miss a couple of weeks, it's going to be the end of, it's going to be the do or, you know, the do or don't kind of situation. If you're not there to participate and you come to me at the end of the term and you're asking to be able to make up a lot of content, it's just not fair and it doesn't follow the format for the class. So you have to be consistent in your work. This is my email content or my email right here, whoopsies. And then also my phone number. This is also available in the information link under the first module. Feel free to text me. I really appreciate texts. I think it's important that you do reach out because keeping in touch with your faculty is a sure way to increase your grade, as long as you're also participating. So writing, I think part of what we get with the humanities courses is these skill sets that are quote unquote soft, but are important, like proper voice, critical thinking skill sets, the ability to kind of build bridges, and, you know, referencing and properly citing to your sources. So you know that when you quote someone, you know, quote, quote, that you have to directly reference. But even when you paraphrase, right, when you take somebody else's ideas and reformulate them into your own words, it's still not your original idea. And so it's important that in those moments you are also taking time to properly cite to the sources that you're actually referencing. Same thing goes when you're summarizing content. So just think of it this way. The rule of thumb is basically if it's information that the average person probably wouldn't know, then you need to reference it. And understand that now that you know you're in higher education, some of what you're learning are things that not everyone would know. So just because you know it doesn't mean that it's common knowledge, okay? So keep that in mind because you need to cite things when they're not common knowledge. Any facts, information or data, right, needs to be cited. But what kind of sources are you using? I oftentimes find that students will reference YouTube videos, they'll reference Wikipedia and .com resources, and also dictionaries and encyclopedias. And none of those resources are academic and meet our standards here. I know you're probably thinking, but Alyssa, you know, dictionaries and you know, encyclopedias, they have information in them that's, you know, that's valid, and that might be true, and it is true, but they're not considered academic. They're considered reference materials, okay? So the difference is that what we're asking from you in these resources is that you're going to academic content that's thorough and expansive, and you're analyzing it, okay? And then make sure that you're evaluating so that you're not using biased sources if you can help it. You know, I like to use .gov and .edu resources, and then some .orgs as well. And doing so, you can help kind of filter out some of that information that's not good for citing. Incidentally, the reason that Wikipedia is not good for citing is because anybody can go in there and they can change the information. I could go in and I could change the information about, you know, I don't know, the Dow Jones, you know, I have no idea about economics, not my strong suit, right? And so if I can change that information, then there's no way to ensure that it's reliable. And that's the problem with Wikipedia. You gotta use your own critical thinking when you're looking at resources, and make sure that you're questioning whether or not there's an intention within the author to, you know, lean one way or the other on a topic, because if they are doing that, even if you agree with the lean one way or the other, it's still a bias and it has to be considered. And so just make sure that, you know, you're referencing properly and you're thinking outside of the box. One place that I like to go when I'm just trying to get a feel for a new topic is Google, right? We all like Google, or most of us do rather. And if you go to certain pages of Google, you can actually wean out some of the non-academic content. So if you go to Google Scholar, you can, from there, search for topics, and they'll give you articles that you can reference. And what I love about Google Scholar is if you find an article that you like or some kind of reference material, there's a cite mechanism already in this page that you can click on, and it'll actually give you the citation for that resource in APA or MLA or Chicago, and you can just copy and paste. So it's an easy change right there. There's also advanced search, and this is another one where I think I want to share with you what that looks like. So stop sharing this page, start sharing this page. So I'm at Google. This is one of my favorite ways to start learning about a new topic, is to go into Google Advanced Search, just right here. Click on that. And the topic for this week is the history of cultural diversity, right? Now, I've found a phrase that, you know, kind of encompasses what I want to look at. And then I'm going to go down here to site or domain, and I'm going to restrict my resources to .edu resources. And what that means is everything that comes up in my search here is going to be from a .edu, and is largely something that I can consider reliable for the purposes of citing in our class. So hopefully you'll use this Google tool to help you in your research. Okay, so that's Google Advanced and Google Scholar. So I want to talk about the frameworks for our class, because we are talking about cultural diversity, and cultural diversity is a complex topic, and we are all from cultures, right, that may or may not have been embracing of other ideas. And what that means is we have to think about the way we think. We got to think about the way we think about the past. We have to think about the way that we think about other people. And we have to think about why it is that we think the ways that we do. So let's start here. Let me back up. What is cultural diversity? There's a lot of different definitions, but I like this one. I've kind of formulated this. Cultural diversity is the representation of differences in values, beliefs, customs, and attitudes that are inherent in the formation of specific group identities over time. Whew, that's a big old long sentence. But as a historian, what I know is that, you know, humankind came up in about 5 different cradles of civilization. Cradles of civilization. There was one, and I should actually have a picture for you here. Actually, let me pull that up. because it'll make more sense to you if I can show you here. Okay, so cradles of civilization, right? We, as you can see from like this picture here, these red spots 10,000 years ago are where people began to settle and to begin to create these civilizations that came out of Africa. Some stopped right here in Egypt, some stopped in the Indus Valley, right? Down in this way, some all the way into the Yellow River. And then of course we have our Mesoamerican civilizations, the Incas, the Aztecs, the Mayans, all from the Olmec, actually. My point in talking about this and showing you this picture is that it doesn't matter if you were born here or here or here, right? Your identity was shaped by the environment in which you were born into, right? For instance, if you were born on the Greek Isles, you know, a country that is an island, your relationship to seafaring, to being on the water, to you know, fish, right, as your food sources, all of it's different than if you were born on the western border of what becomes like ancient China, where you're landlocked, right? And you're also on this bridge between like the Indus Valley cultures and Buddhism and Hinduism. You're gonna have a very different experience and awareness of the world than if you were actually on those Greek Isles, right? And so the reason I say that to you is because when we talk about cultural diversity, right, as these values, beliefs, customs, and attitudes that are inherent in the formation of specific group identities over time, we're talking about the fact that even though our beliefs and our customs and our values might look different, we all share the common experience of rooting customs and cultures based upon where we are at in the world. And that is a larger unifying truth than the truths that are only within the group themselves. And so for our class, what I'm asking you to do is to back up your perspective from where your identity is. You know, your identity is here. I'm asking you to take a step back and look at a larger perspective. Because if you can learn to do that, that skill set of critical thinking, if you can do that for yourself, you're going to be able to build bridges of understanding in your job, in your community, right? In your own family. So these are the skill sets that you learn when you take a cultural diversity class, right? What about your own characteristics then come from the influences of your family, come from your local community? Have you thought about that? I mean, after all, we are all building our identity from the day that we're born, right? And as we go about, you know, growing and expanding, we learn to like certain kind of, we learn that we like certain kind of music. We learn that we like, you know, Pepsi over Coca-Cola, you know. We learn who we are in the world, and all of those, our religion and, you know, our gender, our sexual identities, our gender identities, our, you know, class identities, our race identities, our nationalities, all of those are lenses in which we see the world through. And that's healthy and it's beautiful in its uniqueness. But you have to be careful because those are our lenses, and we might begin to see them as universal truths in the world. And if we begin to see them as universal truths, then we're creating an us versus them dichotomy, where people who don't see the world the way we do are somehow different from us in meaningful ways. And remember, our identities are here, but there's a larger scope in which we all connect. And so it really is a false truth if we begin to think that our identity and our truths are the only truths that matter. So think about how you identify yourself. I I just recently moved to Western Massachusetts, which is really far north. I came from New Orleans, y'all. I came from New Orleans, and now I'm in Western Massachusetts. I went from a population that was like 75, 80% people of color, and I think there's like 4 other people like me, and, you know, four brown people around here. So, I mean, they're very different when it comes to, like, you know, the diversity that I'm seeing. Also, you know, very different when it comes to like the weather and, you know, so I know now I'm a Southerner. That identity is out there, right? I'm a woman of color, and although I'm biracial, half black and white, being from the South, one drop rule, y'all, right? So I identify as black, but I'm a person of color. I am a historian. I'm an educator. I'm a Saints fan. Who dat? Who dat, right? But I mean, you know, as I chant my football team's, you know, a call there, I'm sure some of you are bristling because you probably, I don't know, maybe you're a New York fan or a Indianapolis fan. I don't know, right? But if I say to you that the Saints, that's the best football team, that's my truth. That's my truth. But it may not be yours, right? And so if I allow my emotions and my affinity, my affiliation to be what I approach you with, I'm not going to hear anything you have to say about, you know, anything other than the Saints are the best. So there's a time and a place, and these skill sets you're learning here, right? This idea of understanding your identity in order to be able to operate around it, that's a benefit to you in the business world, right? Where sometimes things are going to get kind of weird and you kind of like keep it together, KIT, keep it together, right? And so critical thinking allows us to do that, but even more so, it allows us to find ways to find commonality amongst each other so that we can build a better tomorrow together, right? So, you know, our identities can sometimes challenge us. I mean, it is cold up here, and I don't understand why people have so many apples in the fall. I'm not saying, right, that it's wrong. I'm just saying, how many times can you go apple picking? What are you doing with those big bags of apples? That's not where I come from, right? So here's a challenge that I have to understanding is they're all happy. There's a lot of happy people eating a lot of apples around here. Maybe I would be happier too if I ate more apples. I'm trying. Sometimes our identities can get in our way, right? And then we got to think about our relationship to our community and how that impacts us and our identities. And come on, there's no way that you are in this class and you don't know what I'm talking about when I say that, you know, identity politics is playing a large role in the way in which we are governing together right now. So it's important to think about, you know, that. We have to contextualize. If you're going to do this and you're going to be fair, you've got to be able to, you know, think about the ways that we think and find ways to truly put yourself in other people's shoes. If you go in with an attitude, you go in with an assumption about what you expect, right? You're already coming in with a lens on that colors your ability to navigate something fairly. We're human. We're not going to ever be completely unbiased. But if we check in and think about it, then, you know, we can do our fair share to try to be fair. Critical thinking helps us to distinguish facts from opinion. Hey, right? Oh, that's a conversation we had today. When we consider, right, where our sources come from, we can think about the subjectivity or the objectivity of them. And, you know, some statements can sound like they're true, but they're not. You know, the Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776. This is an objective claim. I'm not saying anything either way about it. It's true. The First Amendment of the Bill of Rights protects freedom of speech, press, and religion. True. George Washington was the 5th president of the United States. Sounds like I know what I'm talking about. Sounds like it could be right, but it's not. And you know, that's an easy given one. We know that one. But what if it's something more complex that I'm asserting to you from a position of authority, right? Do you question it? Where do you go to find out whether or not I'm telling you the truth? You need to question your resources. You need to question me. You need to question, but respectfully, authority, right? You would question for yourself, but not from a place of attitude, from a place of objectivity as you seek out the truth. Factual statements that were once considered true may be considered false over time, right? The pseudoscience behind racism and the perpetuation of slavery is a good example, where, you know, there was this medical understanding that said that, you know, people of color are mentally inferior. And so it is to their benefit that we hold them in chattel slavery because it's the best that they can achieve on that without us. They're not civilized. Well, you know, that might have been considered fact at that moment. I can tell you, anyway, but we know today that it's not true, right? And so facts change over time if what we're talking about is a debunking of pseudo concepts that were created to marginalize groups. Right? If that's what we're debunking and we're just deconstructing, then yes, what is considered fact may change. Scientific facts might also change. Pluto was a planet, then it wasn't a planet, then I guess the planet again. I don't know. So subjective claims, these are ones that come from our feelings. And when I say something like, let's talk about abortion. Ooh, as soon as I said that, I bet you had another bristling, right? Like, here we go. Well, when I say that, whatever side you're on this, there's a lot of emotion behind it, right? People feel very strongly about this issue. And that's good. But the feelings, right? If you have that many feelings about something, then you have to ask yourself, how do I find a way to be objective with all of these feelings? It's not easy, right? So we want to make sure that we're not being subjective, and even thoughtlessly so. Sometimes we can make statements without even really realizing we're doing it. Excuse me. Something like, this last one here, everyone knows that slavery was wrong. That is a generalized statement that can't be proven because you can't talk to everybody, right? New York is the best city in the United States. Obviously, that's, a subjective statement because it's New Orleans. You know what I'm saying. So let's think about that term civilized that I brought up a minute ago. Can you define civilization without looking it up? Like, how do you define it? What do you think constitutes a civilized group of people? Is it something like, do you have written laws? If you have written laws that are there for everyone to read and then you enforce them, that might make you civilized. Do you need printed money? If I'm trading a chicken for some rice, is that not civilized? What about a certain type of government? Do I need a certain kind in order to be civilized? And if you said yes or no to any of these, then think about whether or not your answer was subjective or objective. Because requiring any of that means that these Amazonian tribal peoples, right, that these indigenous peoples are not civilized. Yeah, well, I've had someone argue, well, there was a European religious man who tried to go in there recently to talk to this group of people, and they threw poison darts at him and killed him. And that doesn't seem very civilized. And I said, well, that's true. They did do that. Of course, this man that was coming in for conversion reasons was violating federal law there, because contacting these groups is a violation of law under the Brazilian law here. And also, you know, coming in like that, you could be exposing people to diseases. We know that now. So if you're going into a hostile environment where there's a protection because this is a group of people who have not had much contact, you know, their rules were to stop invasion. I'm not saying that I like the idea of people dying. I'm not saying that at all. But if they're not civilized, then when a country kills someone, are they not also uncivilized? Is it because they're using poison darts? That's the problem, right? My point is that we have internalized Euro-American concepts that say that our way is the most advanced, it is the right way, right? And those ideas are intrinsically involved in the language we use, in the definitions we use, sometimes in the qualifiers we use. So think about the way you think. Think about how you feel and what role your feelings play in the way you treat other people, because we want to build bridges, not tear them down. In this class, we'll be talking about that. So I look forward to your contributions. And if you have any questions, like I said before, feel free to send me a text, and I'll be looking forward to seeing you in the discussions. Bye.